You are the temple of the Holy Spirit. One of the things the Holy Spirit does is right here. The Holy Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. He always prays according to God's will, and God knows the mind of the Spirit. And what is the Spirit praying for? Praying for your security, praying to bring you to glory, interceding for you. The Spirit is your intercessor, your personal indwelling intercessor, interceding according to the will of God. The Father will always hear and always answer the intercessory prayer of the Spirit, because the Spirit always prays according to God's will, and God always does His will. And God's will is that all who were predestined be glorified. And the Spirit prays to that end. It doesn't happen just because God had said it happened. It happened because God makes it happen, and the Spirit prays that it happen, and Christ intercedes so that it happens. The Trinity is very involved in that. The Spirit is praying that we get to glory. That is God's will. God hears that prayer and answers it according to His will. Now carry that same idea down into verse 34. Here is the Son at the right hand of God, also interceding for us in perfect harmony with the will of God, and that gives us the confidence that Christ doesn't have to argue God into anything. Christ is praying consistently with the will of God, which is to bring us to glory. In John 11:42, Jesus said, I know, talking to the Father, I know that you always hear me. God always heard the prayer of Jesus, because Jesus always prayed for God's will to be done. So you have the Holy Spirit praying for the continuity of your faith. You have the Holy Spirit praying for your protection, that you might never have to face something more than you could bear. The Holy Spirit praying, as it were, from within you before the throne of God, always according to the will of God. And then in heaven at the right hand of God, you have Jesus Christ interceding for you, also in perfect harmony with the will of God. And as a result of all of that intercession going on, we are kept secure. Turn to Hebrews for just a moment. The book of Hebrews, chapter 4, verse 14. Since then we have a great high priest, speaking of Christ, who has passed through the heavens in His ascension, Jesus, the Son of God. Let's hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who has been tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore draw near with confidence to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Listen, He's not a high priest who will only intercede for us if we're innocent. He's not a lawyer who only takes the case of those who are innocent. He is a high priest who intercedes for us knowing we're guilty, and knowing that we need grace and we need mercy. We can't possibly get what we deserve and survive. So here we can go to this high priest with confidence, verse 16 says, that He will provide the necessary grace, that is the necessary favor, in spite of our iniquities, that we need, the necessary mercy, the withholding of judgment. And we will find from Him mercy and grace. This is just a tremendous, tremendous promise. There are people, who think that, well, you can lose your salvation if you sin too much. There is no limit to grace. When you go before the Lord, no matter what you've done as a Christian, and you seek grace and mercy, it's there, isn't it? Where sin abounded, what? Grace did much more abound. Look at Hebrews 7 for a moment. Hebrews chapter 7. Verse 24. Just in case somebody might think that Christ might turn over His priestly work to somebody else. He abides forever and holds His priesthood permanently. I'm glad for that, aren't you? There won't be any change, folks. He will always be there. He will always be interceding for us. Hence, verse 25, He is able, listen to this, to save for a while. Is that what it said? I don't think so. He's able to save what? Forever. Well, how can He do that? Because He always keeps on living to make intercession for them. He is that high priest, verse 26, holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. And he doesn't have to daily, like other high priests, offer up sacrifices first for his own sins and then for the sins of the people, because this he did once for all when he offered up himself. Is that a great verse? It's all done. It's all finished. And now we have a high priest who's perfect. And he's paid the penalty, and he's done the work, and he's made the sacrifice. And now he just keeps on interceding for us. You see, everything is settled in heaven. Everything is settled in heaven. I can't resist this. Go back to chapter 6. Once I get into Hebrews, I can really get lost. Go back to chapter 6 of Hebrews. Look at verse 17. In the same way, talking about oaths and swearing to confirm things in the human level in verse 16, and in verse 17, in the same way God, listen to this, desiring even more to show to the heirs of the promise, look at this, the unchangeableness of his purpose. If God purposed before the world began to save you, is it going to change? Not going to change. It's unchangeable. And in order to demonstrate to the heirs of promise the unchangeableness of his purpose, he interposed with an oath. People who want you to, this is the typical pattern in the Old Testament, Abraham and so forth. You make a promise, you make an oath. You make a covenant, you make a contract. So God, using a human sort of means, wanting us to understand how absolutely perfect and unalterable and unchangeable his saving promise is, made an oath. Verse 18. He did it in order that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to what? To lie. So if God made a promise, that's the way it'll be. We may have strong encouragement. We who have fled for refuge in laying hold of the hope set before us. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. God made pledges. God made promises. And then God sent Christ into heaven